Back in 2017, I lived in a small town in Louisiana with my older brother. Hurricane season was always stressful there, but that year was especially bad. For almost 2 straight days, it rained non-stop. The streets flooded faster than anyone expected. By midnight, the water outside our apartment complex was already reaching halfway up parked cars. The power kept flickering on and off. Every few minutes, the entire apartment would go completely dark. Then the lights would come back. Then darkness again. It felt like the storm itself was breathing. Around 1 a.m., the electricity finally died completely. No internet. No lights. No TV. Just rain. The kind of rain that sounds violent. My brother and I sat near the living room window with flashlights while listening to emergency alerts on his phone. The authorities were telling people to stay inside no matter what. Apparently some roads had collapsed from the flooding. At one point, my brother looked outside and said, "Why is somebody standing out there?" I thought he was joking. But when I looked out the window, I saw it too. About 30 feet away from our building, standing perfectly still in the floodwater, was a man. The water reached almost to his chest. But he wasn't moving. Not even slightly. He was just facing our apartment building. Watching. At first, I assumed maybe he needed help. But something felt wrong immediately. The storm was brutal. The water was moving fast. Yet somehow the sky wasn't drifting at all. It looked unnatural. My brother yelled through the window, "Hey! You okay?" No response. The man didn't move. Another flash of lightning lit up the parking lot. For maybe half a second, we could see him clearly. He looked old. Very old. His skin looked pale gray. And his clothes looked strange. Almost outdated. Like something from decades ago. Then darkness again. My brother kept trying to call out to him. Nothing. Eventually, he said we should probably contact emergency services. But cell service was barely working. Calls wouldn't go through. So we just kept watching him. And the longer we watched, the worse it felt. There's no logical way to explain this, but both of us felt this overwhelming sense of dread. Like every instinct in our bodies was screaming that something was wrong. After maybe 10 minutes, the man finally moved. But not normally. He didn't walk. He slowly turned his head toward the left. Then his entire body followed. And he began moving through the water. Except, there were no splashes. No sound. Nothing. He just glided. That was enough for my brother. He closed the curtains immediately. We both started trying to convince ourselves it was just exhaustion or stress. But then came the knock. 3 loud knocks at our apartment door. Not frantic. Slow. Deliberate. My brother froze. We both stared toward the door. Another 3 knocks. Now, logically, someone needing help during a flood isn't unusual. But our apartment was on the 2nd floor. And the outside stairway had already collapsed into the water hours earlier. There was no way anyone could reach our door. My brother whispered, "Don't open it." Then came another knock. This time harder. The doorknob slowly rattled. I remember my chest feeling ice cold. My brother grabbed a kitchen knife while I shined the flashlight toward the entrance. The knocking stopped. For about 20 seconds, everything was silent except for rain. Then we heard something else. Water. Dripping. Directly outside the door. Like someone soaking wet was standing there. Neither of us moved. Then came a voice. Very quiet. "Please let me in." The voice sounded wrong. Not emotional. Not scared. Almost rehearsed. Like someone pretending to sound human. My brother shouted, "Who are you?" No answer. Just dripping water. Then, footsteps. Slowly walking away from the door. We stayed awake the entire night. Neither of us slept. When morning finally came, the rain had slowed down enough for emergency crews to start rescuing people. The flooding had destroyed most of the area. Later that day, While speaking to one of our older neighbors downstairs, we mentioned the man we saw. The woman went completely pale. Then she asked, "Did he look old?" We said yes. She got quiet for a few seconds before telling us something that still bothers me. Back in the 1970s, before the apartment complex existed, that exact area used to be an old road. During a flood, a man had drowned there after his truck got swept away. According to her, people in the area had reported seeing him during major storms for years. Standing in floodwater, watching buildings, and sometimes knocking on doors. To this day, I still avoid storms, because every time heavy rain starts hitting my windows late at night, I think about those knocks, and I wonder what would have happened if we opened the door. When I was 19, my family lived in a rural part of Tennessee. Our house sat near a creek that flooded almost every year. Usually it wasn't a huge problem. The water would rise for a few hours and then disappear. But one night in 2021, things got bad fast. A massive storm rolled through around midnight. I woke up because of thunder shaking the walls. At first I thought it was just another normal storm. Then I stepped out of bed. My socks instantly got soaked. There was water covering my bedroom floor. I ran into the hallway and saw my parents panicking. The creek behind our property had overflowed. Water was pouring into the house from underneath. We started grabbing whatever we could before evacuating. But outside conditions were horrible. Trees were falling. Roads were already flooding. So my dad decided we'd wait for emergency crews. The water kept rising. By 2 a.m., it was nearly knee-deep inside the house. The weird part started shortly after that. I was helping move boxes upstairs when I heard somebody yelling. At first I thought it was a neighbor outside. But the voice sounded close. Too close. Like it was underneath us. I stopped moving and listened carefully. Then I heard it again. A man's voice. Muffled. "Help me." I looked at my dad and asked if he heard it too. He nodded immediately. The voice sounded like it was coming from beneath the floorboards. Now, our house had a crawl space underneath it. Basically a small dark area beneath the house where pipes and wiring were located. And because floodwater was rushing underneath the house, we assumed maybe somebody got trapped down there somehow. My dad grabbed a flashlight and opened the crawlspace entrance near the kitchen. The second he opened it, freezing cold air hit us. I remember that clearly because it made no sense. The weather outside was hot and humid, but the air coming from that crawlspace felt icy. The voice came again. Louder this time. "Please!" My dad shined the flashlight down into the darkness. At first we couldn't see anything except moving water. Then the beam caught something. Eyes. Reflective eyes staring back at us. But they weren't human. They were too far apart. My dad immediately stepped back. At that exact moment, the voice changed. The crying stopped. And whatever was down there started laughing. I can still hear that laugh in my head. It sounded distorted. Wet. Almost bubbling. My mom started screaming at us to close the hatch. My dad slammed it shut instantly. About 5 seconds later, something hit the underside of the floor. Hard. The entire kitchen shook. Then another hit. Then another. It sounded like something massive was trying to force its way up from underneath the house. We all backed away. The banging continued for almost a minute before suddenly stopping. Then silence. No voice. No movement. Nothing. About 30 minutes later, rescue teams finally arrived by boat and evacuated us. The next day, when the floodwater receded, my dad checked the crawl space. There was nobody there. No animal either. But deep in the mud underneath the house were strange marks. Not footprints exactly. More like long drag marks. As if something had pulled itself through the water. We moved out 3 months later. And even now, years later, my dad refuses to talk about what happened that night. But sometimes when storms get really bad, I remember that voice begging for help beneath the floor. This happened to me last year in Texas. I drive trucks for a living. Most of my job involves overnight routes through empty highways. You get used to being alone. But after what happened during one storm, I'll never drive through flood conditions again. I was transporting equipment across state lines during severe weather warnings. The company told us to continue unless roads became officially closed. At around 11 p.m., rain started getting extremely heavy. Visibility dropped so badly I could barely see the lines on the highway. Cars started disappearing one by one until eventually I was completely alone. No headlights behind me. None ahead. Just darkness and rain. Then my GPS lost signal. A few minutes later, I noticed water covering sections of the road. At first it was shallow. Then deeper. I started getting nervous. Truck tires can handle a lot, but floodwater is unpredictable. Eventually I reached an area where traffic barricades had been knocked over. That should have been my warning to turn around. But I thought maybe the wind had blown them aside. So I kept going. Big mistake. About half a mile later, the truck suddenly dipped hard. The road ahead had partially collapsed underwater. My front tires slammed into deep floodwater, and the engine stalled immediately. Within seconds, water started rising around the cab. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, trying to call for help. Nothing worked. No signal. No response. Outside, rain hammered the windshield so hard it sounded like rocks. I realized pretty quickly I might actually die there. The water kept climbing higher. Eventually it reached the bottom of the windows. That's when I saw someone standing ahead of the truck. A woman. She was maybe 20 feet away in the middle of the flooded highway. At first I thought she needed help too. But then I noticed something horrifying. The water around her wasn't moving. Everywhere else, the floodwater was rushing violently. Around her, it was perfectly still. She wore what looked like a white dress soaked with water. Her hair covered most of her face. And she wasn't reacting to the storm at all. No movement. No blinking. Just standing there, watching the truck. Then she slowly raised one arm and pointed toward the right side of the highway. At first I didn't understand. Then lightning flashed. For a split second, I saw that the highway directly ahead was completely gone. The flood had washed the entire section away. If my truck had kept moving another few seconds before stalling, I would have driven straight into open water. Probably dead instantly. I looked back toward the woman. She was still pointing. Then my driver's side door suddenly jerked open from the force of the water. Floodwater rushed into the cab. I panicked and climbed out onto the side step. The current almost pulled me away immediately. But somehow I managed to move along the guardrail toward the direction the woman had pointed. About 50 yards away, there was an elevated section of road not fully submerged. I climbed onto it, and waited there in the rain for nearly 2 hours until rescue crews arrived. The strange part came later. One of the rescue workers asked why I stopped where I did. I told him about the woman. He looked confused. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Earlier that same year, during another flood on that highway, a woman had died after helping stranded drivers escape rising water. Her body was never recovered. According to him, multiple drivers had reported seeing a woman in white during storms near that exact road, always pointing people away from danger. I don't know what I saw that night. Maybe stress. Maybe exhaustion. Or maybe something else. But I know one thing. If that woman hadn't appeared, I wouldn't be alive to tell this story.